You may be, as I am, the kind of person who is impatient in reading a book, especially a long book. I often flip to the end of a chapter or even the end of the book to see how it turns out. But there's a lot that I miss in doing that. It's not a good habit, and I am often sent back to the earliest part of the chapter to reread and rediscover what I might have missed. There are things we miss in the gospel narrative, in the miracles of Jesus particularly. The focus is on what Jesus is saying and doing. The focus is on how the grace of God at work through the person of Jesus brings healing, health, vitality, restores faith and hope to a person. And then what? Oh, that's the question I often ask with some of these characters we meet in the gospel. Jesus works a miracle, and then what? Well, let's look at some of these. We have the blind man Bartimaeus, one of my favorite stories in the gospel. A man who is at the edge of the oasis of Jericho, just on the boundary, the border between life and death, between a fertile oasis and a dry, barren desert. There, hanging in the middle between life and death, is a blind man, begging. As Jesus comes along, he cries out, "Son of David, have pity on me." And although Jesus' disciples try to silence him, the Lord will have none of that and tells him to come to him. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asks. Bartimaeus says, "Lord, I want to see." And then he's healed. And we're told he followed Jesus on the way. Of course, the way was the earliest title of the church. And then what? We don't hear the rest of the story of Bartimaeus. That's left to our imaginations. Or what of the man who lay at the side of the pool of Bethsaida for 39 years? Jesus comes upon him, and knowing the legend that the first person who gets into the water after the waters are stirred up is healed of their afflictions. Jesus walks to the man, and as a professor of mine said in the seminary, you have to hear this with sarcasm dripping from the mouth of Jesus when he asks him, "You've been here for 39 years and you haven't figured out a way to be the first one in that pool? Do you really want to be healed? Or maybe you don't want to be healed?" When he says, "Yes, I do," Jesus, of course, heals him. And then what? We don't hear the rest of the story. Or the man lowered through the roof by his friends on a mat. Jesus heals him on a Sabbath, which gets him in trouble, but he says to the man, "Pick up your mat and walk." And he does. And then what? Or the swineherd, who was possessed by a legion of demons. When Jesus freed him from those demons and sent them into the swine, who ran over the cliff into the Sea of Galilee, the man was released, perhaps restored to his wife, his mother, his friends. He was himself again. But then what? I sometimes humorously wonder, how did he explain that to the owner of the sheep, of the pigs? Clearly, the owner of the herd of pigs didn't have demon insurance, so the owner of the herd probably said, "And what am I supposed to do? I lost all of my pigs. I lost my livelihood." And then what? Oh, we could go through one story after another, one miracle after another of the Lord. People whose lives were changed by the simple touch or word of Jesus. And then what? Well, that's the fodder for prayer, isn't it? That's grist for the mill in our spiritual reflection. Because how many times has that happened to us? An encounter with Jesus, a touch, a word, the act of grace that changes us. And then what? St. Paul, who himself was changed by one act of powerful grace, wrote in his letter to the Romans, Well, we who have been saved by Christ, our sins forgiven, do we go on living the same way? Of course not. Our lives were changed by the gift of God. So much was given to us. We owe God so much in return. We can't go on living the same way. Nor did any of these people who, through the ministry of Jesus, received grace and healing and new life. Consider any of those persons and consider anew the gracious touch of God in your life and ask yourself, and then what? God bless you.